Back on. Welcome, everybody. And we're going to hear from the prime sponsor of SB 389. And I recognize Senator Bradley.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. For the record, Jeb Bradley from Wolfboro. I was approached by a constituent on this bill who is a guide, a fishing guide, looking not only to extend the season for trout, but also to increase revenue for the department by having a amended license that would allow for more revenue with an extended season. After talking with the executive director, we thought that the fee increase might be problematic, so I didn't include it in the bill. Then I met with the department biologists who expressed some concern about extending the season for trout. And then I heard from my constituent who really only cared about the revenue enhancement. So I would recommend interim study on this bill.
Okay. Wonderful. Comments from the committee? We're seeing none. Thank you, Senator.
That was easy.
All right. That's it. Perfect. And Diane? If you're brief, we can make my executive right away.
I can be real brief. Hi, my name is Diane Timmons. I'm with New Hampshire Fish and Game. Thank you, Chair and Committee, for allowing me to speak. I did speak with Senator, and we are in opposition of this bill, SB 389, for multiple reasons. The primary one is that extending the seasons for catch and release in a general way is not feasible due to the fact that a lot of our waters that are catch and release are under special management. So we're actually looking at having trout populations prosper. So whether that be wild reproduction or growth in general, when you extend the seasons into their spawning period, which we've documented through thousands of electrofishing efforts, we've documented that their spawning can exist as early as September and extend as late as December. So having the season extend through that period opens up the opportunity for anglers to be walking through their nests, which are called redds, and they would have no idea. They're actually very hard to identify. And so primarily biologically, we would not like to see this go forward. And also, of course, the RSA that already exists that allows the executive director of Fish and Game to have oversight and guidance on our laws. And so we'd like to be able to keep this this particular biological regime under his guise, just so that way, as things are changing, as our data and research comes in, we have that opportunity. So with that, that's really it.
Thank you very much. Questions from the committee? Seeing none. All right. And we'll close the hearing. Seeing I have nobody else to speak on this, unless you want.
Do you want executive?
Yep. Motion to move into exec?
Exec.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Comments?
Move interim study.
Second.
Comments? All in favor of interim study?
Just one, Mr. Chairman. Senator Bradley asked that we interim study it. Okay,
I just saw him.
All in favor of interim study?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none. Is there a motion for consent?
Move. Second.
Are we good? All right. All in favor of interim study?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, I'll take it out.
That was because of consent motion.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Duh. I need my sugar. All right. So is there a motion to move out of exec?
So move.
All in favor of out of exec?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, thank you very much. All right, we got a minute. Good, huh? Not too fast? All right.
So you have 6 minutes.
We got 6 minutes for the next.
Till 9:15.
All right.
Do you have another bills you want to exec while we have time?
Well, it might be a little more complicated.
Which is IT or IS?
I've got 451 ready.
451?
Yeah. If you want to have
Are
an
we still
amendment.
are we still in exec?
No,
Did-
we moved up.
Move exec.
Do you want to get back into it?
Second?
Okay, all in favor of back into it?
Aye.
Any opposed, seeing none. Senator Waters?
I'd like to move Senate Bill 451 on to pass.
Is there a second? I'll second for discussion.
And I'll move amendment 0613, and I'll talk to it.
And I'll second that for discussion.
And the people have it?
I have the.
You are recognized, Senator.
You got it, everybody got it?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So just as a refresher, this is the kind of part 3 of our site evaluation committee work. We started last year with 281, and we'll be seeing from the House Bill 609. And this piece, the House supports, but they wanted to, they thought it should be a separate bill. What this does, as I explained in the hearing, is it's about existing facilities, being able to have an expedited SEC process. In the hearing, there was some back and forth over whether it should be the nameplate capacity, the interconnection capacity, and there was always also some concern from some groups about whether there was sufficient period for public comment in it. So Jim Monahan and Nick Krakoff and others worked on this amendment, and Eversource as well, and they decided that what they would do is use the interconnection capacity as the whatever interconnection capacity you have at the site, which is what really is the more relevant than the nameplate itself. That is what would qualify for coming into this procedure, and then it makes some clarifications on the application process, on how and when the public should be formed, and
That's page
how
2.
and when the SEC. Yep, you'll see down at the bottom of page 2, and then. Again, thanks to Nick Krakoff and other folks that making sure that there's sufficient public notice and public hearing, as you'll see playing out in a couple other places on page 4. So I think that we have what we need in this amendment, and thanks again to all who have worked on it, and I think this will, again, has the support of the House Chair, and here we are, Mr. Chairman. That's it.
Lots of yeoman's work on this. Thank you. Further discussion? All right, are you ready to vote?
Just let me ask, Michael, you want to comment on this at all? You're good? Okay.
Drew?
Yeah,
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Did everybody get my email?
Hit your mic.
Oh, sorry. I sent a brief email to the committee last night regarding the timeline, the cutting the days in half. I have a little bit of concern that that's going to make it harder for the public to sufficiently engage in the process. Sometimes the permitting, especially things coming out of DES, don't necessarily happen or may not happen in the most timely manner, and it give the public a very short amount of time to actually engage. And that's really my only concern. I think the connectivity, the interconnectivity is a good idea. I didn't see any reason to arbitrarily go by nameplate capacity. It's whether or not you can get the power into the grid. But the cutting the deadlines in half does give me a little bit of pause.
Then on page 3?
That's accurate, yeah.
You know, 120 days and 100
Phil, could you
days.
give him a copy?
Yeah, I have it on my phone, but
Thank you. Jim said you would present it today, that's why.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, yeah.
But I would.
and I'm fully supportive of making the process a lot simpler. I don't know necessarily that equates to making it a lot faster. And again, it's not necessarily that I think there would be a lack of ability to do the necessary studies. I just want to give the public as much time to engage in the process as possible. And that doesn't always mesh up, you know, the way that you want it to.
If I may ask, Mr. Chair. So just where are the day numbers? that you're-
Well, let's see here. On
This-
page
the lot of
3.
time was spent on this about the public process with the CLF folks, so.
I think this is where he's talking about, page 3, line 7
Okay, so what,
Page 3, line 7, that's correct.
and 8.
You said the CLF folks are good with it?
yes,
Okay. Well, I got to be honest with you. I saw this for the first time yesterday, so I took a pretty quick look at it with the folks at DOE. I think that if they're fine with it,
They are,
They're
yeah.
they're basically the public.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And it'll go over to the House, but I'm sorry, I didn't see the email last night or else I would have.
Oh, that's-
called you, but,
it was just several sentences, and I
but
just said I had
as
concerns.
This was there were a lot of meetings on this. And
Oh, good.
They agreed, so.
Then I'm certainly not going to throw a hand grenade into that.
All right.
Sounds good to me.
Overall, you're excited about this amendment.
At my level, there's a range of excitement, right?
As long as you make the meter, it's fine.
We've not excited at all, and then we have kind of excited.
Oh,
It's sort of somewhere in there.
right.
But no, it's good. It's
Thank you.
good.
All right.
I just wanted to come into my
I
2
appreciate
cents.
your input, and if it becomes more of a concern, we can probably take care of it in the House.
Slightly longer testimony than last time.
Yeah, I appreciate, yeah, you're long-winded today. Exactly. Thank you very much. Further discussion? Seeing none. All in favor of Amendment 0613S?
I
Any opposed?
move on to pass as amended.
Seconded by Senator Pearl. Okay, all in favor as moving ought to pass as amended on SB 451?
I
Aye.
move consent.
Any opposed? Okay, seeing none. All in favor of consent?
Aye.
None opposed? And we will move out of exec. Thank you very much.
Waters, maybe you want to take that out?
Yeah, I'll take it out.
Yeah, Senator Waters. Well done. Okay. Hi, Kamish. How you doing? Welcome. So now we're going to hear from, relative to reestablishing a large animal veterinarian incentive. 45 more seconds. So that's all right. Wow.
Thank you. Thank you.
We are so efficient today. Look at this. I'm glad you weathered the snow. Appreciate you coming here.
Well, you know, but 11 aren't even in, so I'm feeling pretty snappy today.
All right.
For those of you who may be encountering snow, I wish you safe.
I think there was a flake in Nashua somewhere.
You saw a flake?
Maybe. I dodged it, so. And, your car hit? No. All right. You just let us know when we're ready to fill.
You may have it already? There. What?
I didn't see it.
I don't have an
It's all
amendment.
right. I mean, we can put
Do you have an amendment?
I saw it online, but.
450. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I don't have it yet.
All right, we're good. Senator, you are recognized for SB 545FN.
Thank you very much, Chair Avard and members, committee members. For the record, good morning. My name is Sue Prentice. I'm the state senator from District 5, 15 communities, including a large part of Grafton, part of Sullivan, and one in Merrimack County, the beautiful town of New London. So I am here today to introduce Senate Bill 545, which, as introduced, was to reestablish the loan incentive program to basically incentivize veterinarians, large animal veterinarians, to
Jane.
come to New Hampshire.
Go ahead, I'm listening.
All right, sorry. Come to New Hampshire, either be part of, either come to New Hampshire, or as they were starting out their education from a workforce pipeline, have this as an option as they went through potentially, well, they'd have to go through University of New Hampshire's pre-vet program, have a connection to 4-H. I had put this together and put it out there, and it didn't, although it seeks to, and I'm going to talk about the problem, be one of the solutions to the problem, it didn't get the kind of traction that, and support. Folks said, hey, thanks, but maybe there's a different way to approach this. So I want to just talk a little bit about the large animal veterinarian crisis, how this could impact our food supply, speaking particularly to our agriculture community, and have introduced to you an amendment that replaces the loan incentive, and instead, at the suggestion of members of the agricultural community and the Farm Bureau, am seeking to establish a mutual aid system for large animal veterinarians. And I'll be clear right up front that even with this, I'm still getting some feedback, and I'll tell you exactly what the things are that I think we still need to do to consider this. So there is my preamble. Thank you. So during
That was a preamble?
that was a preamble, so set loan incentive aside, focus on mutual aid. I'll tell you why this is a problem, what I want to try to do creatively to address this problem that has actually come from, again, the agriculture community. And I do believe there's still a little more work to do on this, and I'll tell you what the work is. And you may hear from others today. So during the pandemic, many Granite Staters turned to New Hampshire farms for their food supply. They're trusted community partners, and the backbone of New Hampshire, quite honestly. I can remember when Claremont used to be in my district, driving up Piper Hill Road and seeing a line at the LeClaire farm stand, okay, for meat and as well as for vegetables. I can remember at the McNamara Dairy in Plainfield, folks waiting to get their dairy products because they were hesitant and not completely trustful of the supermarkets, but they knew that they could go to their local agriculture community, their farmers that they had gone to for years to get, food supplies. So this was a time when the agriculture community really came through for us. They've always been there. I think based on this problem with large animal veterinarians that could impact our food supply, we need to be there for them. So here's what I know. Livestock producers all across the United States, including here in New Hampshire, are dealing with a serious shortage of large and food animal veterinarians. According to the United States Department of Agriculture in 2023, the shortage of rural veterinarians has reached an all-time high, with 500 counties in 46 states, one of those 46 states is New Hampshire, is deemed as having a critical shortage of large animal veterinarians. The shortfall poses a risk not only to livestock and farmers, but to the country's food supply, to our food supply right here in New Hampshire. Unfortunately, it looks like the shortage is only going to deepen as the pipeline of new veterinarians, especially those who specialize in large and agricultural animals, continues to stagnate. Over the past 6 months, I've been engaged in conversations about how to address this emerging large animal veterinarian shortage, which is quite honestly on the brink of a crisis here. And it's statewide, but in one particular part of the state. As of August 31st, 2023, the northernmost large animal veterinarian clinic in the state closed its doors, leaving it was described as a chunk, but we'll say a large area or region of the state with even less access to services. I learned yesterday that a large animal veterinarian practice right in my backyard in District 5 is making a choice to only serve companion or small animals and will be ramping down its large animal veterinarian practice. That was a big surprise to me and will have an impact on some of those farms that I named as I opened my testimony. So we need both a short-term and a long-term approach to this. I have spoken with the Department of Agriculture, more specifically, only briefly once to the commissioner, who I appreciate is here today, but multiple times with the state veterinarian about proposed possible solutions. And while they have a sincere and genuine interest in the outcome, there's a concern about the impact of what I'm proposing and how it would impact their department in terms of workflow and where the charge and legal authority actually lays for this. So I think that is something that we need to work on, but I do appreciate the frank nature of their response and cooperation along the way. So there's a concern that they don't have the workforce or they have the capabilities, but not the bandwidth to take on a project per se as this, as I've understood it, and I could be corrected. I did reach out to the Office of Professional Licensure and Certification, and interestingly, from 2020 to 2023, we actually have seen a growth in those that license as veterinarians. But, so we're at right now 1,118 as compared to the same time in 2022 with 1,090. But here's what we don't know about them. We don't differentiate between large and small animal. And so I had Director Courtney break it down by zip code so we could dig in, especially to the northern part of our state, and find that in Coos County, we had 8 licensed veterinarians, but I can't tell you, that entire county, whether they're large or they're small animal veterinarians, which I think in itself is something that probably moving forward, we need to keep track of if this continues to be the situation that it is. So and the other thing that Director Courtney shared with me is although they license, they might not practice. So these are numbers that represent people who carry a license, but they may not actively practice in this state. As an example, I'm a paramedic. I have a certification. I actually don't have a license right now because I'm not practicing, but up until March 31st, I did. So I carried a license and was counted in that number, but I didn't practice. I only got my license back so I could assist during the pandemic. So this is not unusual, but we just don't have any way to really know unless we break it down by zip code. And I also looked at Carroll County, which was under 12, I believe, but Coos is one of the more concerning areas. I was able to spend some time talking with the New Hampshire Federation of Farm Bureaus and had a really robust meeting a Zoom meeting with representatives, farmers, and veterinarians from throughout the state. And they actually urged me to think about this not just as a North Country problem, but as an entire state problem. And to try, and although they appreciated the idea of trying to deal or address this through a workforce pipeline, thought that we needed a more immediate and creative solution. They spoke with me about the difference between, say, a large animal veterinarian. I'm a paramedic. This is all new for me, but I took this up because I believe it's a significant issue in our state. So a large animal veterinarian has all of this equipment. They are a mobile entity unless they have a place where you can actually bring, trailer animals in, which we'd like to avoid. We'd like to provide these services out in the field. And they spend a lot of time, they describe it as windshield time, in their vehicles, taking care of the different, it could be a cow, it could be a goat, it could be a lamb, they're out on the road all the time. That really struck me. Our small animal veterinarians, our companion ones, are the ones that take care of, like, my Maisie. And it's easy to, you take your Maisie and you go and see them. They have set office hours, and then there are emergency vets that take call afterwards. Large animal veterinarians, once they enter the profession, if they choose to take the specialty up, it's a 24/7 job. One of the reasons that we're starting to see the decline of folks that are actually willing to do this work. And there's a limited number of programs, and there's a significant amount of debt associated with this, which also complicates student debt, which also complicates it. So unless we start to turn this ship around, we're going to continue to go down this path, and we're going to continue to see less and less availability, I believe, which will grow outside of the North Country, as I heard from other members of the agriculture community. So keeping that in mind, there's the problem as I see it in my, in my limited capacity in talking to folks in the field. What I'm proposing is something that is not new to me, but might be new to this system and was based on feedback that I received from some folks from the different farm bureaus, is what if we established a mutual aid infrastructure like we have for public works, like we have for fire departments, like we have for ambulance services, which would allow for, when needed, and this really should be focused on emergencies, when needed, being able to, entering into a written agreement so when you're needed, you can actually go, you can borrow equipment, you can work in that person's area to help with that patient, I call them the patients that need the assistance.
People too.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, and but they are what I hear from these farmers is they're their families. That this situation is stressing them. considerably. So they can actually, if the person who's covering that area is unavailable, and the bigger issue becomes nights and weekends and emergency call, if they enter into an agreement, they can actually go do this. We could provide some reimbursement for mileage while they're on the road. They would be able to borrow equipment from one another in the delivering of their duties, so they're not having to carry all of this potentially with them. This is, tried and tested in terms of, again, fire, emergency medical services, and public works, but it's a different system here. I understand because I am not a livestock I'm not a farmer, but I am doing my best to get to know them. So that's what this amendment brings forward. So after sharing this with some of the stakeholders, I received some additional feedback that said that that we need to consider in here. Well, first of all, I need to change my definition of livestock, that doesn't align, which I understand. There's a second part to this bill as well, but I want to handle this first part. That I want to make sure that, what I'd like to do is instead of asking the Department of Agriculture to handle this based on their concerns about bandwidth, direct in the language that this be contracted with a not-for-profit that has works in this space that could actually stand up and manage this program. And we need to, as I'm hearing, create an advisory committee of established and stakeholders who can help with the standing up and the monitoring of this, because the way I proposed it is a pilot so that we can try it out and see if it's something that works. That's the first part of the bill. The second part of the bill is something I also heard in speaking with members of the farming community, is we should be assessing the role of the veterinary technicians, and is there more work that they can or should take on. So there was really a lot of harmony around having that conversation. So I added that in as a study committee as a second part of this bill. So with that, I'm going to close my testimony. I'm happy to take questions. There may be others who have more expertise in this area that want to speak to it, but what I will say is it is that where I started and where I am are completely different places, and I wouldn't be here without some creative thinking of members of the agricultural community, but I think there's some fixes that we need to make so that we provide clarity about entering into the agreements, when you go, so that you're not taking away from your own practice, how and where you can access equipment, and potentially a location that, even if you need a bed because you've traveled like way far out into the state, a place you can rest in between while you're getting back to the area you serve, so like a way station. I did, and I'll just send this around, I have a letter or an email of support from 2 veterinarians from the central part of the state, Dawn Lester and Jennifer Malone. I'll share that with the committee, that are looking forward to any and all types of creative solutions we can bring forward to assist. So with that, I'll close my testimony. Thank you. And
Got a question? Yeah. Senator Pro with a question?
Well, thank you for your testimony. Are you envisioning, or I guess I'll back up, in your conversations with OPLC, did you discuss license reciprocity as far as veterinarians from other states coming in and filling some of this gap?
so that's part of this. I had envisioned, as we do with fire and mutual aid, is that you carry the license that you have, that you come across the border. If we needed to do it that way, you can provide care, and then you need to return home. That's pretty traditional in, say, in emergency medical services. Mm-hmm. This is what we do right now. If the Massachusetts Ambulance Service comes across into, say, Salem, Atkinson, wherever it might be, they care for a patient, they pick them up and they transport them, or even just treat them on the scene. They're covered by their license from their home state, and if there are any issues with licensure, you can deal with that. We may need to address this in here in terms of making sure that they have licenses in both states. So that is also further, that I don't think I've addressed that adequately. That's how it works in EMS. But if the agriculture community and OPLC, the Department of Agriculture, want them to be duly licensed should they come across the border, then that's something we can put in here. Yes.
Follow?
Yeah, just one, well, we've worked on license reciprocity a lot in
Yeah.
other areas. And off the top of my head, I don't know if it applies to large animal vets. I'd have to look into that, but that's most likely what you're trying to fix is not gonna come from within the state of New Hampshire. You're gonna need to pull from other states in order to have this mutual aid system function, because I think we probably have a pretty good in-state mutual aid system already amongst the vets that are in the large animal field. They kind of help each other and cover. That's what I suspect is already occurring to some extent.
To some extent, but
Yes.
not fully fleshed out in a formal, structured way.
And I think for this to work, you're probably looking at pulling from other surrounding states to kind of fill in the blanks. That's my feeling in reading this.
And Chair, if I may? So I had the opportunity to speak to a large animal veterinarian who grew up in, I believe it's Columbia, New Hampshire, who lives over and practices primarily in Vermont, but is duly licensed, and often because of the shortage, comes across the border to take care of patients, take care of the animals that are not normally seen by his practice, but someone, there's a need and it's got to be done.
I think that's probably what you're looking at, for this to function in any kind of a manner that will work.
Okay.
Further discussion? Senator Waters?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, thanks. So I couldn't quite understand, we have the amendment 634, and does that reflect the things that you were discussing, or there's still further things you want to change in another amendment?
It reflects all but clearing up the definition of livestock, creating a not-for-profit that this would be contracted with to manage this program, and creates an advisory committee. So those are the three things that are not addressed in here in amendment.
Oh, so we're going to get more from you?
Yes, you
All right,
are.
all right, that's all I
Correct.
needed to know, thanks.
Thank you, Senator Waters.
Any further, Senator Bertzel?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for taking my question. What is the reason that a lot of them are closing down?
Thank you for the question. It is a 24/7 lifestyle. What I hear from those mostly who've left, and Don Lester, who I passed around, is a veterinarian who still deals with companion animals, but is not doing the large animal practice anymore, that it is 24/7, and now he said what you're looking at is veterinarians coming out of school with a large amount of debt, and when you take on this lifestyle, you're in a place where, again, you're practicing around the clock, you're taking call, and the reimbursement, the payment for that is not, the farmers pay their bills, but it happens in different ways. So if you're coming out of school, you're more likely to go and work at, say, the place that takes care of my Maisie, which is now a corporate entity, because you can actually, you have a better salary and you can work at paying down that loan debt. So it's the nature of the work, the 24/7, the grind behind the windshield, and not being able to pay yourself back so that you can actually pay down your debt and live your life. You're welcome.
Who's Maisie?
Maisie is my 14-year-old Yorkshire Terrier. She's my little baby who is a consumer of veterinary care.
But a large animal in heart.
Oh, absolutely. Totally.
Gotcha. Further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony.
All right, and I appreciate your time and consideration. Okay.
Commissioner Jasper. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I am Sean Jasper, the Commissioner of the Department of Agriculture, Markets, and Food. I appreciate what everyone is attempting to do here. And I'm coming before you knowing I'm not going to make any friends with people sitting behind me. I am glad to hear that the senator has suggested taking the department out of this mix. We don't have the bandwidth for it, and perhaps I should stop there. But I'm not going to.
I was waiting for it.
There is a significant problem in this area. You know, if you go back 40 years ago, there were something like 800 dairy farms in the state. And so the veterinarians were able to have a smaller area that they were dealing with, they were able to keep busy. We're down to, I think now, under 60 private herds in the state. And that's the preponderance of the large animals that we have is dairy cattle and has been. So it's not profitable. And so while what's being suggested here is a reasonable idea, again, I don't think it is going to work because of the fact that there's such a large territory and so few veterinarians dealing with large animals that they're already busy, and I don't think for mileage at the, whatever the rate is now, and I haven't looked at it, is going to be an incentive. What I hear more and more from people within the veterinarian community is people don't want to pay somebody to come in on a regular basis to do welfare or regular care of their animals. They only want those veterinarians when there is an emergency. There's a suggestion that people should put those animals on a trailer and take them to a veterinarian. Well, that probably works well for some animals. It's going to be very hard to take a 1,500-pound cow that may be down and get it into a trailer. So we're in a tough situation. But the reality is there are only, in our opinion, and I've talked to Dr. Crawford about this quite a bit, there's only really two ways to solve this problem. That the state says this is something that the state should be involved in, and we pay one or more veterinarians to set up a practice for large animals, and we pay them, and then whatever they get for income offsets that. I'm not supporting that. I don't think that's the role of government. The other way is for farmers who want to have this service to do what many people do with lawyers and pay a retainer. The bottom line is this all comes down to the veterinarian being able to make a living. And right now, there are not enough farms in particularly the North Country, but it's a statewide problem. Frankly, it's a nationwide problem. People are tired of getting kicked by cows and bitten by donkeys or whatever. And people are spending so much money on their small animals now that that's where the money is. And while you may love horses and you may love cows as a veterinarian, if you can't make a living at it and you can't depend on a steady stream of income, it's not something you can afford to do. So, people could get together and, as I say, all right, what does it take to support a veterinary practice and a veterinarian? And, you're going to pay that retainer to keep that there. People are already coming across the border to help, but there's only so many hours in the day. If you want to try this and it doesn't involve the department, fine. But I would suggest before we put state resources in, you find a few veterinarians who are willing to come in, and I know you have a brief email saying that's support. It doesn't say, hey, I'd sign up. But to get some veterinarians together and see what they believe. It's so easy for us to sit back and say, oh yeah, this will solve the problem. You have to make the veterinarians part of the problem, and putting state money into this without knowing that there's a path forward, I don't think solves a problem, and we just kick the can down the road. As I've said, there are the two solutions that I can think of. And unfortunately, as much as I believe that the efforts here are sincere and very well-meaning, I was a firefighter for 20 years in Hudson, and I know the mutual aid system well. It's not set up for this type of thing. You're coming close by. You're ever bringing people in. The problem in the North Country is there aren't enough veterinarians to call somebody from the next town over. You're calling somebody from perhaps hours away, and there just aren't enough hours in the day for somebody to do that. So I'll end it there, and be glad to take any questions and suffer the slings and arrows that I will no doubt suffer from having opened my
Well-
my big mouth.
Well, the first thing would be, is there any possibility that you could contact a few vets to come in and talk about this? Or is that,
Senator, that's really, I'll tell you, I am so far behind on everything I'm doing right now. I haven't done the fair grants. I've got cost of care grants to do, and we're coming up with going to fiscal for $8 million coming in from reallocated ARPA funds to deal with there's essentially two of us in my office dealing with all this stuff. I don't have any bandwidth. Part of that's my own fault because I didn't get the language for the assistant commissioner that the Senate very graciously moved along quickly, and the House Finance now has not had any bills, so they haven't had any hearings, so that stalled momentarily. But yeah, right now, I'm beyond overloaded.
questions from the committee? Senator Pearl?
A couple thoughts. So license reciprocity. Do you know if the changes that we made in 596 last year will allow for veterinary licenses from other jurisdictions to come in and operate with that, and get that expedited ability to be licensed in
I
New Hampshire?
do not know, and so what I'm about to say is just from memory, but I'm hearing that there are vets coming in from Maine and New Hampshire now, and I don't know based on what.
Would you agree that that's probably the quickest way we're going to get more services into the state, is if we can draw from other resources outside? And I don't know that those resources are even available either.
Well, again, that's the issue. If it's not allowed, it certainly should be, but I'm not sure. Again, it's the matter of the hours in the day.
Yeah.
And the number of vets there are, and there just aren't enough. The USDA is having problems, and they're trying to figure out what else they can do because they can't hire enough vets to work in their facilities.
A lot of years since I've been in the large animal industry, but I remember the problems were there then in the late 90s, and it hasn't gotten any better, certainly. One more follow-up, if I might. I'm seeing this same issue persistent within all of the agricultural services. It's not just in the large or the veterinary care services, it's feed supply, it's fertilizer supply, equipment dealers. We're starting to see a shrinking of all of these services available to our New Hampshire farmers. I don't have the solution to this, and I don't know if you have thoughts on ways that we can address this. And again, it's beyond veterinary care, in my opinion. There's many other services that are having the same issue. Just your thoughts on that?
No, unfortunately, you have to follow the money in all of these things. And when there isn't enough, there aren't enough farms, people have got to go further. I know, like, for people who need service on their milking machines now, they're coming up out of New York or way over in Vermont where there used to be people here. It's just fewer and fewer with tending to be smaller farms, so they're just, you've got to go to other places for the network. I did want to mention, the slaughterhouse thing that we've been dealing with in that capacity. One of the things, and I think it's similar here, I think there is is that people say, well, I can't get a slaughter date for 2 years. Well, when you look into it, it's because there are so many people who only want to raise a few animals and have certain times of the year when they bring animals into the slaughterhouse where you can't gear up for 5 months of the year or 6 months of the year. Those operations have to go. So the people who are getting the dates are bringing an animal in or multiple animals in every month so that those employees are kept busy. So if somebody wants a slaughter date and, they only want to bring in a few animals, the spaces aren't available unless somebody else's animal dies and then the slaughter date becomes available or something like that. I think it's the same thing here. As I said, I want a vet when I want a vet, but the other 345 days of the year or whatever is I don't want to pay for it. Well, the vet can't just sit there and do nothing. And so that's why I say I go back to, if we want to pay for somebody, yeah, that'll solve the problem, or the farmers have to enter into that retainer type of agreement, which is expensive, and in many cases, the cost is more than the value of the animals they're dealing with, and that's unfortunate, but, you know, we've got a problem that is, I don't believe is going to be solved without somebody putting money directly into veterinary practices.
If no one else, I have one more follow-up here. So what's the situation within the equine industry as far as vet services available to them? I know there tends to generally be a little more money available more than there is in other areas of the large animal industry. And is there room there for incentives to perhaps get some of the equine vets to move over into the, you know, cattle industry or service that area as well?
I really can't speak to that very well, but I do know that within the equine industry, there is usually a lot of money. And those veterinarian services are provided on a regular basis. There's, you know, those veterinarians are in on a regular basis dealing with the hooves, you know, dealing with the teeth, just dealing with everything. So most of the people who are involved in equine have those services set up. I have not heard of a shortage in that area for the large scale horse owners who make this their business or an expensive hobby.
It might be a thought to look at incentivizing perhaps some crossover into other areas of livestock besides equine, perhaps. I don't know. I mean, they generally tend to be very specialized in the services they perform within the equine industry. But just a thought I had.
They are, yeah. That's beyond my area of expertise.
Thank you.
Senator Altshuler?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Commissioner, for taking my question. I'm struck that you have so much that you said that you have to do, and yet have found time to come here and throw a wet blanket on this suggestion. It's a proposal to solve a problem, and confused as to why the answer would be to throw it back on the veterinarians and tell them to find a better business practice when we're trying to solve a problem. It looks like, in looking at the fiscal note, this is, in terms of state projects, a wildly inexpensive project to go forward with. And also, according to the sponsor of this legislation, they're actively looking for a nonprofit to execute the program for them. So why so harsh on this? Why? It would not be adding to your very long list of to-dos. So,
Senator, I appreciate that. I came here, I was not planning on coming here. Frankly, I'd lost track of this one until State Veterinarian gave me this amendment this morning, and I saw the department's involvement in it. I did sit here, I was already here, and I'm just trying to, yes, I'm throwing a wet blanket on it, and I told you that I was not going to make any friends, but I hear a lot, I talk to a lot of people, and you know, if this is what the legislature wants to do, it's no skin off my neck, but I'm giving you my honest opinion because of my experience, and if you are more than welcome to throw that opinion out the window. Unfortunately, for better or worse, I tend to say what I'm feeling and always have, and that doesn't always serve me the best, but I try to do the best I can for the state of New Hampshire. And I don't believe that this, as well-meaning as is actually going to make any difference, because I think all the large veterinarians that are out there are already working as hard as they possibly can in providing all the services that they can. And that's why I suggested that if I'm wrong on that, you need to actually talk to the veterinarians to find out what their bandwidth is.
Senator Birdsall?
Thank you. Thank you for taking my question. Now, I know in my area, alpacas are becoming a major livestock. And they are considered
Large animal.
large animal? I would
I
think.
believe they are. I don't have the definition in front of me, but I believe that, yes, they are, and they would certainly fit into this category at any rate. I think what we're talking with small animals, you're talking simply cats and dogs, ferrets, and
Right.
things of that nature, anything that would be, even a pig, which you could say, well, that's a small compared to a cow. Well, it doesn't necessarily mean to be. It's still a large animal, although it may only stand this high.
So, follow up. So, if the veterinarians, now, I don't know if you know how many veterinarians actually handle alpacas. Could that transfer into some of the large areas or large animal area?
Well, I think that you would find that all the veterinarians receive the same training in vet school, so that they may decide to have their practice in one area, but when they come out of vet school, they're qualified to deal with all animals, as far as I know. I don't think there are 2 courses of action there, but I'm not an expert in this area. But I'm sure, again, they could, if they're handling alpacas, but that they could handle other large animals. I think it's just simply a matter of time and money, and it just has not proven to be a profitable area. People are wearing themselves down, and the old country vet who was used to handling farms. I mean, let's face it, there used to be probably 2 or 3 farms in the state of New Hampshire on most roads, and now you're lucky if you can find 2 or 3 farms in a town that has animals.
Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much, Commissioner. Oh, you have a question? Oh, I thought you were raising your hand. All right, thank you, Commissioner, appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Joyce Brady?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. My name is Joyce Brady. I'm the president of New Hampshire Farm Bureau. I'm also a livestock farmer from Coos County. Full disclosure before we get started, I will be talking about a vet from Vermont, and he is my son. So I just want everyone to be clear on that. Because of my relationship with my son, we've had many talks, deeper talks than most farmers have with their vet. So my son went to Cornell, received his veterinary license there. He came to work for Cold Hollow Veterinary Services in Enosburg Falls, Vermont. And the following year or 2, he bought the practice. When he bought the practice, there were 5 veterinarians there. The couple were each veterinarians. They retired. One stayed on for about a year. He's added on since. He's now up to 7 veterinarians. He has his New Hampshire license also, which is not hard to get at all. I think it was $100, $150, maybe a quiz. He got his license. The last 2 vets he brought on, he made them get their New Hampshire license also. When he started vet school, he was one of 100 students in his class. 12 of them were large animal. Of the 12, 5 of them were livestock. So the other 7 were horses. He is the only one left in private practice. The other 4 have gone to either research or small animals or university. And a lot of it has to do with what we keep talking about is windshield time. There was one evening, he stopped in at the house about 8 o'clock at night. He had spent his whole day on the western border of Vermont, and then got home, sat down for supper with his young kids, and got a phone call in Pittsburgh, New Hampshire. He stopped at 8 o'clock on his way to Pittsburgh. We encouraged him to stop on the way back. He did not. He got home at 1 o'clock in the morning. And he said he was actually scared. By the time he got home, he felt like he was a drunk driver. He was so tired. So this is one of the major problems with the large animal veterinary practice. He has been working very hard, and I've got written testimony from him for you to read about his practice and what he's doing, and a couple maps of where it was before Wood Pond went out of business and where it is now. He has tremendously expanded into New Hampshire. He covers all of Coos County now and is dipping down into northern Grafton County because no one in Grafton County will go anywhere else. They will not take new clients. So as he is working so hard to expand and try to help people out, I just want to read his last sentence, and it might go towards helping study this bill, making it a better bill. We would be grateful for any aid the state can provide us for what we are currently doing and what is to come. If funding was available, it would be used towards infrastructure, equipment, and travel expense. So he is already trying to help solve this problem. But he has his school debt. He also has the mortgage of a brand new practice. He's got 7 vets under him. To expand, right now they're just kind of running down when they can to help out. But to actually expand, that's more debt on top of him. We are in a crisis state right now. And you've heard the other people talk. And it is affecting our food source. These people are raising animals for us to eat. The government this past summer had taken away from antibiotics, over-the-counter antibiotic purchases. Now you can't even treat a sick piglet or sick calf without having a vet. We are in a crisis state. He's trying to help. He wants to expand. For a quick solution, we need some money to help get some type of, whether it's a building, some equipment, so vets can go to an area. I think I didn't take notes. I'm trying to answer other questions that were talked about. So back to our conversation, at one point in time, we were sitting around the dinner table and it dawned on me, I'm the president of New Hampshire Farm Bureau. Like, Earl, what can I do to help you? And he's like, we need to start thinking outside the box. And so I talked with Rob. We put a meeting together. We had vet medical, vet tech, the state vet. We had some Farm Bureau members there, and we kind of talked about, where the laws are, and kind of, that was our first meeting. Our second meeting was with Senator Prentice about this bill. And then one thing that Earl had mentioned, and our next meeting is going to be trying to pull the vets together. So we are working on this as much as we can. Because, right now we're hearing from our members that the vets aren't taking on more clients. So we want to get the vets together and say, okay, can we do something? So that's going to be our next step. So the vet license that, oh boy, now I forgot everything that I was going to. So that's where we're going. This is, a critical state we're in right now. And I think the short term is getting some money someplace so they can extend. I'll handle.
So, it's the beauty about these committees is the fact that they're on YouTube. And if somebody goes to the state website, they can watch what's going on in the committee. I'd asked the commissioner if he had a chance to, or time to maybe get some vets to come in and maybe give us their input. But his bandwidth is taxed as it is. So what I'm going to ask you is it at all possible that after this hearing that you could share that video with your vets, have them come up with some solutions as well, because you're going to, all the questions, everything that we just talked about today is recorded. And it'll allow you to go back and you can stop and say, oh yeah, that's a good idea. I didn't remember that. If you could share that with them so that we can come to some type of an agreement. And also the amendments and whatnot, they're available too, so that they can look at that. Mm-hmm. And you'll have a little time to address some of the issues. And also, what the commissioner said, I mean, he's been involved with, this as well for a while. So it would be helpful if they could take time, look at it, kind of ponder it, chew it over, and maybe spit it back at us, and because we're going to have to amend this no matter what, and from what I understand from Senator Prentice. So
yep.
Would that be helpful?
Yes, and we're planning to get, try to get vets together but now that this hearing has happened, and now we have more to look at, yes.
Yeah, you've got now you've got something that you can work with and help us, to navigate this, so that really is the beauty of what's going on here. So if we could have you do that and reach out to them, saying how that you're the pres, we'd like that. Questions from the committee? Well done. Thank you very much.
All right.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Robert, from the Farm Bureau as well? You're not the president, though.
I'm not. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Rob Johnson, representing the New Hampshire Farm Bureau Federation as the policy director. And as been stated earlier, the amendment that's before you is something that we did work with Senator Prentice on. And just want to point out that this is a critical situation, and it's acute in certain areas of the state. And it's from a food safety perspective as well as an animal welfare perspective. We had one of our members who raises cattle and horses, and she actually had to put down one of her horses because she could not get veterinary services in time. This was up in Coos County. The amendment before you is something we spoke with the senator about, and we have a little bit different perspective on. She uses the term mutual aid. I think some of us at least had looked at it more as the providing satellite services, have been existing veterinary practice provide satellite services in areas of need. So a little bit different distinction there in trying to address the issue. And again, this is something where we're trying to think out of the box on this, something a little different. It's as you've heard earlier, this is a nationwide issue. Currently today, the statistics I see are 3% of veterinarians out of vet school are large animal practitioners. 25 years ago, that was over a quarter, even a third, the numbers I've seen. So, and as has been stated, it's for the reasons people have said, just the windshield time and the quality of life issues and that type of thing. I guess the other thing I want to stress is that we have been working with the veterinarians. Back months ago, we had a meeting in our office, and by invitation, we had the New Hampshire Vet Medical Association there, their president. We had a representative from the Vet Techs Association. We had Dr. Crawford there. We had the presidents of Coos County Farm Bureau, of Grafton County Farm Bureau, where the real issues are, in addition to other members. And we have since maintained email communication. We had the meeting with Senator Prentice, which vets were invited to. I sent out the draft of the proposal that Senator Prentice put together and sent that out, and I received emails last night from 3 or 4 veterinarians. So we are working with them, and part of her draft is based on their input, and we will continue to do that. This issue is many pronged. It's going to take a solution here, there, and everywhere. But I guess in closing, I would ask, I do have testimony from one of our members to hand to the committee as well, but I just would ask that you see the value in the very least of holding on to this to work on it further. Yeah. This is a priority for us, and it's something where there really is a need. And I'll leave it, I guess.
So, like I mentioned earlier, I mean, if the vets could take a look at this hearing and just see some of the, how we're processing this and looking at it through a few different glasses, it'll help us to navigate in the future. Again, that's the beauty of being online. If they could really spend a little bit of time to do that, that would help us. If we can come up with some remedies and contact us through emails.
Mr. Chair, I'll just mention to you too, and we have as an organization committed that as we move forward on this issue, we are doing it jointly with the Vet Medical Association. There's no doubt that we want to be lockstep in finding a solution to this.
Thank you, and thank you for your testimony. And seeing how we have nobody else here to speak on this, we are going to close the hearing on 5:45. And Phil, when you're ready. Sure, I did close the hearing, but you're welcome to speak if you like. Go ahead. Come on up. I didn't,
Just reopen.
yeah, seconded by Senator Pearl. Reopen the hearing, if you'd like, and we have a final speaker. That's okay. I'll get this. This is fine. And welcome.
Turn your mic on, Joe.
Yeah, Josie, if you wouldn't, press Josie, press the button. There you go.
Okay. Josie Best, I'm from Unity. I'm one of those farmers. First, I want to answer the question about the alpacas, because I've been in the alpaca business since 98 in several states, and we make our living shearing alpacas, so we go to a lot of farms where they are all over the country, actually, but including in New Hampshire, and they definitely are in the large animal category. But the most thing I wanted to tell you is one of the things is they tend to use vets very regularly, even more than us regular farmers, because so many people that have gone into alpacas are people at about retirement age, and they went into it in the 90s because it was literally a blue chip investment, but they were people that were retiring and had never had animals, so they used vets a lot. The alpaca business is not a blue chip thing anymore. I don't think there is anything that is. But they still tend to have a more often frequent visits with the vets, and they're having the same problems as we are. They tend to give inoculations a little bit more often and watch things. We kind of back it up on another end and go and trim feet and help them with things like that the vets don't have to do anymore because they can't get the vets to do it. But the alpacas are part of the large animal thing, and they still are. There's not so many people that have got 100 of them, but they're out there quite often, and what we're seeing is they're not getting to see the vets because of this reason. This is a very serious issue. I'm now in Unity, and I've worked with sheep around the country and around the world, and we really need the vets to work with. In my particular area, I'm not all the way up in the North Country, but I used to have 3 vets that I could work with if I couldn't get any, and 2 of them have now retired. One has gone back into practice just doing maintenance, but won't do surgeries and stuff because he's doing it on his own and not through the practice that he sold, which is now just small animals. There are horse vets who do work on sheep and goats and cows, but there obviously are some horse vets that want to be just horse vets. So I just want to say that we really, really, really need help, and we are in Farm Bureau, as you've heard. We are trying to get everybody together. I also work on the Humane Commission, the Governor's Commission for Humane Treatment of Animals. We've been working on talking about it too and seeing what we can do. We really do need help with this. I, as a 5-foot-tall person in 1960, graduating from high school, of course, could not consider, even though horses were my first love, people wouldn't even begin to look at me or take an interest in terms of horses. Now, 5-foot-tall women can be horse vets, but I ended up having a really great life because my kids liked animals too, and I got to do everything, and they took me around the world. So even 5-foot-tall women can work with the horses and work with the cattle and all those things. Buffalo I haven't worked with really, but that's about it. So, but we really need help because now I'm down to 2. One of them's actually in Vermont. He works both across the borders around Claremont, but it's a matter of if one of them's busy, I mean, you've just cut your and I very seldom have to have them, but I do keep a running thing, and I tell everybody that I consult with, you need to keep a relationship with your vet, even if you don't have to do health papers, make sure that you get the vet there for looking at your flock or your herd at least once a year so that you can do that. And it's always a recommended thing, it's just people, have a hard time doing that. So, thank you. I just wanted to say I'm part of the Farm Bureau group that's working on it, and we really, really need help to keep going. Thanks.
Well, dynamite comes in small packages. What's that little thing on? Is that alpaca on your hat?
No, it's bunny fur.
It's a bunny fur.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Any questions? Seeing none. Thank you very much. And now we will close the hearing, and we will hear from Senator Waters, SB 390. Pass that down.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator David Waters, District 4, introducing Senate Bill 390 relative to defining critical habitat. This bill has two parts, and I will explain them briefly and then give a little bit of context for the bill itself. In the first part of the bill offers the definition of a critical habitat. This references existing language that is in rules and is what has been used by the director. It seemed that it would make sense, as with a lot of things, to have this in statute, if that is the rule that is being used here. And so this also is in accordance with federal guidelines, which, because of endangered species and other matters, requires the state to monitor and have programs with critical habitats. And you'll see that being reflected in lines 5 and 6, or essential to the conservation of endangered or threatened species. So that is really, I wouldn't call it exactly housekeeping, but it kind of is. Let's have it in statute if that's the definition that we are using. Then the second part of the bill addresses a concern about what we're going to do in New Hampshire due to shifting habitats and shifting migration and species ranges due to our changing environment. We already know the great stresses that this is placing on animal populations. One kind of premier example is what's happening to moose because of winter tick and the rapid population declines, and it may even be possible that at some point we won't have moose anymore. And then there are other species as well because of warming waters, such as brook trout, not an endangered species, but there are other areas that we need to think about what is the future going to bring and how we're going to deal with the fact that we may need to look at other areas that may not be critical habitats now, but maybe in the future as the environment shifts due to warming temperatures and other factors as well. I just will add by way of context that this is something that's being addressed nationwide and worldwide. Most recent report yesterday said that half of all migratory species in the world are in population decline. And this is, a lot of reasons for that, but certainly this is the kind of thing that we're facing as well. So what this, I talked with the director and particularly with the wildlife biologists in coming up with this language. And if we're going to provide some provision whereby we can start looking towards the future, where would we do it? And it seemed to make sense to the wildlife folks in Fish and Game that this is the language they developed, to put this in the conservation programs language, so that when the department looks at conservation lands in their programs, that they could use this criteria to look to the future, that it may be important to look to conservation lands in new areas because they may become critical habitat areas in the future. So that's that language there. As deemed necessary for the conservation or endangered species, the threatened species, again, in compliance with the federal directives on this, but then either within the current or projected future range of a species. And I think in some ways that's the escape valve for us, in that we could start planning and looking at these things. I will note that New Hampshire, the way we do things is that we give the authority to the executive director over these programs. Other states do it differently. I think this is what's important, and so that this is not directing the director to do anything. It's adding a tool to the director's tool chest. There have been some efforts in the past to start to look at this issue. We had several years ago, some of you may remember, a study and then a bill passed on wildlife corridors so that we could be sure that there were corridors for passage of wildlife between habitat reserves and areas that they need to go. And wildlife corridors, again, becoming increasingly important because of shifting environments and what the adaptations that are needed for that. Also, we do have our wildlife action plan, which, we do periodically, and that process is underway. And I think across the nation, and we're seeing that states are really trying to come to grips with what's happening in their environments and what the future may hold. So I think these are relatively small things. I, again, appreciate very much working with the wildlife biologists who came up with this language and a place to put it. And so that is what the bill does.
Thank you, Senator. I just have one question on line 11 where it says the executive director shall utilize all authority. Would it be okay to put may if it's at their discretion?
That's the existing language.
That is existing language, okay.
Yeah. So the only thing that's being changed here is the bold.
Questions from the committee? Seeing it. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Colonel Jordan, are you aware of this?
I am.
Would you like to come up and talk about it?
I don't know that I want to do that. I have someone here who can do that.
Why wouldn't you want to talk about it? I'm just kidding. I only have Jason Stark signed up, and I was going to leave him for last, but.
Fish and Game, the commission has voted to oppose this bill.
Would you like to come on up and?
We were not planning on speaking today, but if you have, or any senators have any questions, we'd be happy to answer questions.
Would you mind coming on up and letting us ask you some questions? And thank you for taking the time, seeing how we asked you to come up. And if you could identify yourself.
For the record, Scott Mason, Executive Director, New Hampshire Fish and Game.
And there is a reason why you oppose this?
The commission voted to oppose this bill. I think they're just concerned with turning regulations into RSAs and making it more permanent. The department already, and I'm sure Senator Waters has alluded to it, we are already working on a lot of these issues as they come up. For us, I think we're probably seeing some of the first issues pop up as far as what we're seeing off of our coasts with different varieties of marine species that we're now seeing that we may not have seen 20 or 30 years ago. We're actively working with multiple states and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, DES, on and I apologize, I can't remember the name of the bird, but it's a bird that we find in our salt marsh. It's salt marsh sparrow. There we go. That can be found in some of our salt marshes that are under threat because of the changes in salt marshes. The issue is as the water levels rise, that will decrease some of our salt marshes. And the thought process is where can we reestablish these birds in a slightly different habitat, i.e., above sea level a little bit more? Where will the new salt marshes be?
How would this bill change what we do with the salt marshes?
I don't think it would. I just wanted to make sure the committee realized that the department is working on these issues as they come forward.
So, am I understanding correctly? This basically what you can do in rules could be affected by us making it in statute?
No, I don't think it would change the effect at this time. It's just a question of if something changes if an issue comes up in the future that we need to move forward on, it may make it a little bit slower for us to come back and have to come back before the legislature to have any changes. Whereas if we can control it in rules, we can be a little bit quicker in our response time.
I see. Well, you've sat on rules.
I did. That's why I put the bill in. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I sat on rules too. right next to you.
So, thank you, Director, and I just want to, because I stated it, but I just wanted to confirm that we did work together on
We
this
did,
language.
absolutely, Senator.
Yeah, thank you. And then, on your point about the definition, and people have been on rules, people haven't been rules, but, the trend over the last 10 years has been that we want to have anchoring language in statute.
Correct.
But since this is essentially following the federal definitions for endangered species and critical habitat, could you explain a bit more about how having this definition there might somehow circumscribe the ability to act in the future?
My crystal ball is not quite that clear, and I apologize for that. I think the concern is just as we go through this process, we are going to see changes in wildlife habitats, as well as populations, and how the different populations interact. And it does create some concern about locking us into a piece of legislation versus being able to be a little bit quicker and flex through rules. For example, like your moose example, the issue with the moose that you're talking about is actually in the northern part of the state, not in the southern part of the state. So our moose management program, we actually have two separate moose management programs, and one for the north that deals with the tick, and one in the south that deals with brainworm. So we need that kind of flexibility from time to time.
If I may just follow up.
Follow- yep.
Since you have the authority as executive director,
Yep.
as it says here in line 4,
Yeah.
I'm not sure how having that definition in statute would slow you down from doing whatever you darn please.
As I said, our commission sets our legislative policy.
And if I may ask one other,
Follow
Mr.
up,
Chairman. So we also did discuss and work considerably on putting the, into the conservation program area, the flexibility that you could look to lands that might be used. And if I may just an example, the salt marshes, I've done a lot of work with Coastal Adaptation Work Group and all the salt marsh issue, of course, as member of the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission for New Hampshire and coast, up Atlantic from Maine to Florida, looking at what we're going to do about marsh retreat, marsh migration, because of the intrusion of salt water. So one of the things that have been looked at very seriously is how is it that land policy will have conserved those areas, or look to conserve those areas to which a marsh wants to retreat. So isn't that kind of an example of why being able to look at the projective range is important?
I would see nothing in current statute that would prevent me from doing that currently. I think if we wanted to conserve land like what you're suggesting, a little further back from the salt water in anticipation of that, I would see no reason why we couldn't do that, under the, obviously the ramifications of our rules, but there's no reason why we couldn't go back and preserve that type of land you're speaking of.
I may follow up on that. It just seemed to me, and as we discussed with the wildlife biologists, that you are kind of limited now to those that are deemed necessary for conservation of endangered and threatened species now, not tomorrow, not into the future. So that's why current or projected future range is the flexibility that I would think you need, because right now, for projected future range, it does not seem you have authority under this program.
I believe I would have the authority to purchase land, and maybe I misunderstood, or to purchase easements on properties. Where my authority would be checked would be like an AOT permit or a wetlands permit, as we regulate some of that stuff. And I'm not sure that was your intent, but that would probably be which would be a bigger limitation on my authority is where I could go on some of that.
Thank you.
Senator Pearl, the question.
Thank you. Thanks for taking my question. Is your concern more with Section 1 about changing the definition of habitat deemed to be critical, or Section 2, which just kind of gives you the ability to look forward?
As I said, as I remember the commission meeting, their concern was just putting this into legislation versus our rules.
Okay, thanks.
Further questions? Commissioner, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
You sure, Colonel Jordan, you don't want to come up here? Jason? We gave him 2 tries at it.
Oh, good morning. For the record, I'm Jason Stock. I'm the Executive Director of the New Hampshire Timberland Owners Association, and we represent timberland owners in the state's forest products industry. And again, we looked at this bill, and our policy committee looked at it, and the concern was, for us, was less the definition, codifying a rule in statute, but more so the conservation programs. This falls under the State's Endangered Species Act. And our concern was, when we look at a future range of a species, that could be incredibly broad. We manage lands, we modify habitats. That's what you do when you harvest trees and when you manage land, is you modify habitats. And one area today that could be a dense overstory, thick with pine and hemlocks. You go in and harvest that, sunlight hits the ground, and species that weren't there before, that were tuned into that coniferous forest, will now be attracted to that. And so, again, so what is a future range of a species? That can depend not only on issues such as climate, which clearly has, I'll call it, more of a macro impact, but also it can have an impact on a more micro. A lot of our members, I shouldn't say a lot, a number of our members participate in the Eastern Cottontail program. Eastern Cottontails like scrub shrub habitat, or not Eastern, New England Cottontail, not to be confused with the Eastern. Yeah, I see Senator Waters nodding. He almost caught me on that one. But New England Cottontail, it's a species that has suffered because our forests have gotten older. It prefers scrub shrub habitat. And if you leave a piece of land that's scrubby and shrubby, trees will grow up, they'll shade it out, that habitat changes. And so we have members that participate in this program where they are actually going out and trying to create patches of scrub shrub within their property to attract a threatened and endangered species. So when we look at legislation like this, and we look at it in the context of the Endangered Species Act, and in the background, and the director touched on this, you have this thing called AOT permits and wetlands permits that can also affect future land uses and future property uses. We look at the language on line 11 that says all authority. That makes us nervous. And for that reason, less with the definition. There may be some very good reasons with the federal nexus to have that definition. But when we look at this, we believe we're talking about more than just land conservation and Fish and Game acquiring property. When you look at all authority and you look at Fish and Game reviewing alteration of terrain permits, reviewing wetlands permits, if there's a threatened or endangered species, intentional or unintentional, on that property. And so for that reason, we've come in and we're voicing our concern with this, and certainly Section 2 gives us pause with the, when we look at projected future range of a species, that addition. Again, I think an unintended consequence could clearly be a chilling effect on a landowner saying, geez, do I really want to participate in this program, create this scrub shrub habitat? There's other programs out there trying for turtles and trying to, as simple as bringing sand onto a log landing, leaving a pile of sand on a log landing for turtles to nest in. again, if I'm a landowner and I say, all right, is this projected future range of a threatened endangered species, is this something I really want to get into? So again, I appreciate Senator Waters' efforts here. And like I said, Section 1, that's in rules. We're living with that now. But the expansion to projected future, that is of concern to us.
I think all the rabbits are in my backyard.
They're probably eastern cottontails.
Oh, yeah.
They're everywhere. Yeah.
Everywhere. My dog loves to chase them. Questions from the committee? Senator Waters.
Thanks, Jason. So just to clarify, the language on 11 line is the existing statute.
I understand that, and thank you for the question. But when we take that existing language and we apply it to now projected future species, and kind of, that's taking existing regulatory language or authority and now projecting it or expanding it onto projected future. That's the concern.
Yeah, so if I may, Mr. Chairman. So, just to note that the programs that are established as deemed necessary for the conservation, I mean, there's a process here of participation on that. And isn't it the case that we are required by federal statute to protect critical habitats related to endangered or threatened species?
It's a good question. It's been my understanding, and this is something for folks much more informed on this, you're protecting the critters more so than the habitats in many instances. So an example is we had someone that was doing a timber sale on the Heights here in Concord, Carner Blue habitat. And the question came up is this landowner would like to harvest, but we know there's Carner Blues in this part of the state. What do we do? And the discussions that we've had and the determination that we got was, as long as you are not injuring or killing a Carner Blue, you can cut those trees. Recently in Bear Brook, adjacent to Bear Brook, we had a landowner that there's a lot of rattlesnakes in Bear Brook. That's an area with a lot of rattlesnakes. Again, state threatened and endangered species. Landowner said, I'd like to do a timber sale, and they were told, you can cut the wood, you just have to make darn sure that no snakes get injured or harmed. So in those instances that I'm aware of where it's very specific, it's more species specific as opposed to the habitat. Now there are black gum swamps. You talked about coastal areas. Those areas, those may have a different designation. But when we look at upland, woodland areas, what we've always been told is don't hurt the species. We're dealing with it with the northern long-eared bat now.
Well, we can talk
Sure.
elsewhere about the federal statute, but you're not going to be harvesting wood in the Crumholz area, but the alpine is an area certainly where there's the environment itself. So
Agreed.
Let me just ask one more question, Mr. Chairman. That, this is a planning process, and wouldn't it be the case that having a planning process where the discussions about projections could be worked out with all of you and the authority of the executive director, rather than having it be in a kind of an emergency situation? And that really is the intent of the bill, because, I referenced earlier about what's happening with migratory species. The wildlife biologist here last year, when asked whether it's true that we've seen a 50 to 70% population decline of all bird numbers in the state, said, yeah, that's true. And so, it's not like we're in the luxury in some ways of waiting. So that's why I just thought, wouldn't it be better to have a planning process related to projected rather than just have it be dumped on you?
I agree with the caveat that we have to be mindful that when you're doing this planning process, you're looking at private properties. And if we want to try to promote folks managing and encouraging threatened and endangered species propagation, we want to make sure they feel at ease doing that, and that there's not going to be a problem. Great, I've been able to get a lot of Blanding's turtles propagating on my property. Now I go to do a timber sale and I'm told, wait a minute, you should only cut, here's the limit, here are some limitations on when you can harvest. That's an extreme example, but that's the concern that I'm hearing.
Yeah, I hear you.
And I agree, we have members that love that type of stuff, but they're always quick to say, I do this, I usually do it on my own because it's my kids and my family's project, and we want to do it because we like it and it's the right thing to do. But when it starts affecting my ability to manage my property or the value of my asset, my property, then things start to get a little ticklish. But planning, yes, but with in mind that we're talking about people's private property here as well.
Thank you.
Years ago, there was this issue with the spotted owl out in California. And apparently they weren't allowed to manage the forest because of the spotted owl. And what turned out to be, because of that decision, massive forest fires because of they were not able to have the flexibility to go in and manage and cut. Is that kind of similar to this as well? Meaning, you did want to cut down the trees because of the habitat, but just don't hurt the owl, if you will. Now the owl's probably gone.
Yeah, no, you're pointing out a great example of an unintended consequence when you focus on in that case, a single species, and there can be collateral issues, whether it's wildfires or whether it's impact on other species. There are other types of species that interact, and again, when you're focusing singularly on a species, you can have these other collateral issues, landscape level or even species level.
So this bill basically, from what I'm hearing, it seems like it is removing flexibility for the department to manage through rules rather than through legislation, obviously. Am I hearing that correct?
That's what I heard Director Mason say. Again, and I think that was principally to the lines 3 through 6. Again, we're already living with that definition in the context of rules. We're not in the position that he is in where he may have to modify moose management, for example. So we're like I said, we're ambivalent to that. Where our concern comes in is when you start looking at projected future ranges and the potential that could have on land use issues or unintended, or creating disincentives for landowners trying to promote species.
Any further questions? Thank you very much. Does
thank you.
anybody else want to speak on this? Seeing none, we're going to close the hearing. I'm glad the commissioner was at least available. Excuse me. Which way did you?
sorry.
There you are, thank you. And we'll hear from the prime sponsor on SB 310. Senator Lang, welcome. Senator Pearl, I'm kidding. Senator Lang's the first speaker. Well, actually, he's not even the speaker. He's just, he likes it. Okay, and so does Senator Jindal.
Would you like me to just rescue you and introduce the bill?
Yeah, absolutely. Somebody save
Thank
me.
you, Mr. Chair. For the record, my name is Howard Pearl from District 17, and I live in the great town of Loudon, which is one of my 12 towns. I am here to introduce Senate Bill 310 relative to bear registration. There is also an amendment that I'm going to introduce that came to us, but the base bill, it's very much described in the analysis. The bill requires the Executive Director of Fish and Game to set up bear registration stations. Currently, if you take a bear, you have to call a CO and have them come and register it in most cases and look at it. And this will just provide a situation that's very similar to the taking of a deer, that you can take it to a registration station. It's been difficult for the COs to get around, especially in the warmer conditions that prevail in September when many of the bear are taken. So this will give that flexibility, and I'll let the department speak to the technical aspects of why they want to move in this direction. Additionally, I've brought an amendment in, Amendment 626, which I believe you've received, and this is in response to some changes in the federal duck stamp program.
Yeah.
Did that come around yet?
Not yet.
Okay, they'll pass that out to you. I was asked to add this on because this is a situation that has occurred after bill filing, and we needed to get this language in. So this seemed like a good bill to put it on. So I've brought in the amendment and hope the committee will consider adding this amendment to the bill.
What does the amendment do?
It includes the digital confirmation and a current and valid electronic migratory bird hunting. It's changes that are federal. I'm going to let them speak to the technical aspects of it because honestly, I don't have a good handle on it myself. But
And for the record, it's 0626.
yes, it is. With that, I'll take any questions.
Questions from the committee?
Thank you.
Seeing none, thank you very much. And our only person who wants to speak on this is Dan Bergeron from MHFG. Welcome, Dan.
Good morning. So I'm Dan Bergeron. I'm the chief of the Wildlife Division at New Hampshire Fish and Game. Thank you to Senator Pearl for introducing this for us. The bear portion of this was largely housekeeping work for us. So we recently, as the senator pointed out, as bear harvest has increased, it's becoming more and more difficult for hunters to quickly register those animals. Prior, you had to do it through a conservation officer or other department staff. So we're looking to expand the ways that people can do this so they can get it done in a timely manner. We wanted to set this up. The wording is largely mirrors what happens with our deer registration, and this would allow, we had this happen for the first time this past season, but we had individuals doing this on a voluntary basis. This would also allow them to charge a fee for that service like they do for when you register a deer or a turkey. The amendment that was put on, that is the result. So last legislative session, we had actually had a bill sponsored that changed the Fish and Wildlife Service had an electronic federal duck stamp that they started to utilize. The way that worked was you could get your electronic duck stamp and you could use that within 45 days as you were waiting for your physical stamp to come in the mail. Just this past December, they changed that law to allow the use of the federal duck stamp throughout the entire season. So really all we're trying to do with this is come up to speed with the change in the federal regulation. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Questions from the committee? Seeing none.
Thank you very much.
Our only speaker on that was you. Anybody else want to talk about this?
You don't want to Colonel Jordan again?
Yeah.
It looks like he wants to speak.
Yeah, Colonel Jordan, you want to speak?
So, actually, I will do that. I'm feeling really pressured.
Good morning, I'm
Three times the charm.
Colonel Kevin Jordan, New Hampshire, the Chief of Law Enforcement, New Hampshire Fish and Game. So the duck stamp was, we actually came before the House and the Senate last year to allow for that, like we do our fishing licenses. The whole world, as you know, is going to electronics. So when you approach a fisherman on the bank now, they hold up their cell phone rather than their fishing license. So in the interest of making this easier for folks, we came here and asked you, and you passed the ability for people to accept that. The problem was the federal law required a signature on that stamp. We were told by the federal authorities, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, they were going to eliminate that last year. They failed to do that. And so we have a law in New Hampshire says you can do it, and the feds would have a law that says you have to sign it. So it would put hunters in conflict this fall. So it was kind of an emergency. So we looked for bills quickly to attach this to, and this was the one that we went to Senator Pearl, and he was gracious enough to put it on. The fact of the matter is, if it doesn't go through the legislature this year, my staff will not be enforcing that law because I don't think it's fair to sportsmen. So that's the reason for the rush. I do appreciate the other part of this is allowing. We do take biological samples from bear. It's one of the only animals, or moose and bear are the only two animals that we do that for. So that's why historically they came to game wardens to remove a tooth. You can't ask the girls at Walmart to do that. So they would be forced to wait for us to respond to these. And in warm weather, that was problematic. So we did it with certain registration stations last year that we felt were capable of removing those samples and getting Dan and his staff the samples they needed. It worked very well, so we're looking just to codify that now in law. So that would be my testimony.
Thank you, Colonel.
Thank you.
Questions from the committee? Seeing none.
Thank you very
Appreciate
much.
it. Anybody else? Going once, going twice, closing the hearing. SB 310. We'll take that first, just to get it out of the way. And we'll hear from the prime sponsor on SB 542, Senator Waters. Oh, you got some really good co-sponsors on here. Wow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator David Waters, District 4, to introduce Senate Bill 542, relative to appointments to the Fish and Game Commission. This bill was brought forward in order to allow certain folks to make their recommendations to the commission at such time as a new commissioner is being nominated for the Fish and Game Commission. And it was developed, the bill developed in the sense of broadening consensus so we can have more support for the mission of the Fish and Game Department, particularly as our recreational and other landscapes change. The first part of the bill, I'm going to ask that we strike. The first part of the bill, relative to Native Affairs Commission, I put this in due to the national movement under Secretary of Interior Holland trying to ensure that Indigenous people are consulted whenever possible when it comes to issues of land management. I think there's some miscommunication as to when the commission got this. We received a letter last night saying they don't want to do it. So if they don't want to do it, we'll just strike it. The second part of the bill addresses the issue that in the state now we've got about a $1.2 billion outdoor recreation industry. It is rapidly growing, extraordinarily important for the preservation of lands that are also used for fishing game, for hunting and other areas. There's a lot of mutual interest there. With the difficulty of maintaining financial support for Fish and Game through Fish and Game licensing because of declines there, I think it's important we start to look to new ways to involve people beyond the fishing and hunting who are interested in preserving the landscape and the uses, including fishing and hunting, for New Hampshire. So this would allow outdoor recreation organizations that have been registered with the Secretary of State for 2 years to be included in that definition of sporting clubs so that if they wish to get together in their counties and to make recommendations for nominations to the Fish and Game Commission when such nominations are being made, they'd have the opportunity to be heard. Now, The way the process goes, as I'm sure you're aware of, is that there's no authority behind this for the sporting clubs. They can make recommendations. It is up to the governor to make the appointments, but it means some more voices would be heard. And my hope is it would further develop support among that huge outdoor recreation industry and hundreds of thousands or millions of people who participate in it annually, to understand the importance of Fish and Game and the Commission for preserving the landscape that people in outdoor recreation want preserved as well. That's it, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So I'm going to strike section 1, lines 1 through what?
10. Well, excuse me, 2 through 10.
2 to 10, yeah.
Yeah.
Strike. Phil, do you have that? No. All right. Questions from the committee? Senator Pearl.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing the bill and testifying and taking my question. I guess in my viewpoint, the primary objection of the Fish and Game Commission is to manage our fish and wildlife in the state. And I guess it strikes a little bit of concern when you start putting other interests in there when they're putting, bringing in recommendations for Fish and Game Commission members. I mean, as much as I appreciate and love the outdoor recreation groups, I'm not sure that they would necessarily be appropriate in the management of our fish and game resources in being involved in the commission. So I guess my question to you is, which outdoor groups would you see being able to nominate a person to the commission?
Well, thanks for your two questions. I'll answer the first one by saying, why would they be appropriately involved in this area? Well, please note the existing language on lines 12 and 13. That the existing definition here for those people who can make recommendations includes wildlife and habitat conservation. Mm-hmm. So while I'm sure a lot of outdoor recreation folks may also hunt or fish, mm-hmm. They're sure interested in wildlife and habitat conservation.
Sure.
Birders.
Like RVs.
Mm-hmm. But people who are interested in birding, they want wildlife and habitat conservation too. They don't want to shoot them, but they want that. So that's the reason there. The second answer is that we have, Senator Bradley established the Granite Outdoor Alliance a number of years ago, and that is just to check their website. It's a really thriving organization, and particularly important for bringing young people together who are interested in outdoor recreation, and enormous growth there. And I'm trying to say here, look, if you like your outdoor recreation, you probably ought to be interested in the Fish and Game Commission and supporting that. And then secondly, my legislation a number of years ago, maybe it was Bradley's, I think Bradley's legislation, then I got the funding for it to establish the Office of Outdoor Recreation in the Business and Economic Affairs Department. We have that. I guess 2 budgets ago, we got some funding through a bill that I wrote that we have that staffed and authorized it to join the National Association on Outdoor Recreation Offices, which does a lot of important work and availability of federal fundings and so on. So I think that you would find that there are a lot of outdoor recreation organizations. I've named the umbrella group, and if you go to the website of the Granite Alliance, you'll see all the subgroups that they work with.
Like RVs, snowmobiles.
I mean, you name it. And I also would think, in the coastal areas, we have people who are interested in rowing. The Audubon, all the Audubon groups. I would think, anyways, the people doing rail trails. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of folks out there. Now, they don't have to do this. If they want to come together and make recommendations, then they would have the authority to do so. So I just think it's opening the door to broadening the base of this process.
Well, thank you. I just was curious what you had for a vision there, because I was just trying to understand how they would integrate into the current processes that are within the commissions, the scope that they oversee.
I just think we're all in it together. We want to preserve the landscape of New Hampshire for hunting, fishing, and for outdoor recreation, and that's pretty important. And this is a huge industry. developing right now in the state, and I think that it'd be good for them to find ways to support the mission of Fish and Game.
Thank you.
Seeing no further questions, thank you,
Thank you.
Senator. And nobody else wants to speak on this? You do? Uh-huh.
You got him
Okay,
started.
so,
I will address that.
Prime the
welcome,
So he didn't want to speak, so when he was asked, but now that he's not asked, he does want to speak. And I have a, who's probably watching, a very capable person at home who was supposed to sign me in here this morning, and obviously you did not do that. So I am here to speak on this bill, if you would allow me to do so.
Absolutely.
All
I
right.
see your name is scrubbed out, so somebody might have been wanting to keep you quiet.
Ah.
All right.
Okay, so again, for the record, my name is Kevin Jordan. I'm the Chief of Law Enforcement in New Hampshire Fish and Game, and I'm here representing the department and most pointedly the Fish and Game Commission, who reviewed this and after much discussion took the position of opposition, respectfully. And I'll try to do my best to explain their thinking, or all of our thinking. I will subscribe to that as well.
Even with the first section scrubbed out?
Yes, and the other thing, I'm glad you said that, because I did see a technical flaw in this, Senator. I don't, actually, the bill is addressing 2063. I think that's an incorrect statute. 2063 involves terms of the commission. 2062 would involve the appointments. So there is a technical flaw there.
Thank you for that.
And even with the front part struck, we were less objectionable to that, actually, as the bottom section, and I'll do my level best to explain why that is. So there have been several, as you know, there are several attempts to change up the makeup of the commission. The commission, our agency was created in the 30s, and we haven't done a whole lot to change it since then, quite frankly. And the other part of that is I would ask you to consider our funding mechanism, which was created some 90 years ago. We're still trying to function with today. So in 1930, we came up with the current current funding system of self-funded. And so the commission, sportsmen and women, all get a little excited when we try to add people to this commission to have a voice in something that we will all argue they are not funding. And the reason that they say that, if you look at any of our biennial reports, including the last one, you will see the general funds, which we come over, and you people are very gracious to bail us out every year, amounts to about 2% of our total funding. So 24% of our funding roughly comes from license sales, 22% comes from federal Pittman-Roberts acts and Dingell-Johnson, which is the sale of firearms and ammo, fishing equipment. OHRV community funds 22%. So, and I know Senator Avard, you've been on many of these funding committees, so I know you understand that. And so I would ask, very respectfully ask, that we take this opportunity, as we were able to convince them in the House, and look at that. The day of self-funding should end. It doesn't work. Right now, I've got my entire team on a bridge on Granite Street in Manchester looking for a young man who jumped from the bridge.
Saw that this morning.
And that is that's being paid for by sportsman's dollars, and has been historically for years. And there's something wrong with that. We're providing services clearly more and more every day for the average taxpayer. If the average taxpayer was funding this agency through either general funds or, I know this is taboo, but rooms and meals, because we're the agency that brings a lot of that money in here. I know that's a problem, and that would be a huge challenge, but quite frankly, we carry or make a major role in bringing those people to New Hampshire. If those funds were coming in to the agency, then yes, it makes perfect sense to me to expand the qualifications for the people that are going to sit on the commission and make those kinds of decisions. Until that happens, we're all concerned about that. So you're bringing people to a table that really don't have the financial commitment than others do. So I just think there needs to be an opportunity for a discussion about that before we change up the qualifications for a commissioner. I'm not saying it's not time. I think it is time. Forgive me, Commission. I think it is time, but I also think that has to be followed by the financial piece of it. It just makes better sense to us.
So there was what, 7 or 8 vehicles at that bridge this morning?
So I've got the dive team there, 5 members of the dive team. I have 2 officers who are on days off that were called out, so that's an expensive. And I have the side scan sonar team there in an effort to keep my divers out of the water. We're going to side scan sonar that to try and find this young man and recover him. And that happens, as you know, often. It happens all the time. But nuisance animal complaints, bear complaints, all of those things are none of us have a problem with that. It just causes me, when I write a budget, to think about that. Where is that money coming from? And that's coming from the sportsmen and women. And so they get a little excited when people want to put someone else on the commission to make those decisions when they haven't got the financial commitment to the agency. And clearly that 2% is a very slight commitment.
What would be a good reasonable amount for the general budget?
I think to be honest with you, I think it should be in that double digit 20 to 22%, 24% like those other funds are. You know, the OHRV community funds 22% currently. I think in this last biennial, they had a 22% commitment to this. They have we have people involved in that on our commission making decisions. And that to me makes perfect sense. You have hunters and fishermen, trappers. We have people that hike, that participate in the outdoors, that are on that because they have licenses as well, but they have commitment in the game. And we hear that privately when we discuss things with them. We hear that. And so I'm not objecting. I just think we're putting the cart before the horse. I think the bigger problem in New Hampshire Fish and Game is funding it for the future, because I think arguably New Hampshire needs us for the future.
Yeah.
They certainly do. And so I think if we straighten out the funding first, which is 90 years old, then come to the table and say, okay, now we've got this group contributing this amount of money. Now is the time to put those people in positions where they can make the decisions, because now they have skin in the game, in my opinion. That's the way we should do this.
Are you short of workforce?
The governor gave us the governor did 2 things for us that I will be forever grateful for. One, he gave us a raise that helped us tremendously. The state employees all got a raise, which was helpful. And the other thing he did for us was he gave me 4 open, unfunded positions we have fought for 10 years to fill. He helped me we funded 2 of those. He funded the other 2, he being general fund. And so we are hiring for that. Just hired our 3rd young female on the force, which I'm pretty excited about. We've not had a lot of women apply. We have 3 now. And I'm looking to hire 2 more people. And so that's helpful. That'll be more officers. It's 48. I had dinner with the chief of police in Concord the other day. He has 90 people covering the city of Concord. I have 48 covering the entire state. It just doesn't make any sense. We can use more of that, but I'm not going to complain. I got 4 that I needed badly. That's more officers than we've had since the 70s, which is a good step. So the funding, you know, I've been here many times over many different issues. The funding has always been an issue. I just would like us to see us spend time changing that and then come back and review who should be making the decisions, because then you're going to have people with more skin in that game.
Senator Waters with a question.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Colonel Jordan, and sorry about the situation
No.
today.
That's
horrible. So just this bill does nothing, isn't it true? This bill does nothing to change the qualifications and nothing to change the appointment.
It doesn't. The last paragraph was quite frankly, and this is from Kevin Jordan, not from the commission. That last paragraph worked pretty well to protect that. I think, and I can't speak for the commission, but I think their concern was the recreational group. I think Senator Pearl's question kind of nailed it. We didn't understand what group that would be. If we're talking about bird watchers, if we're talking about hikers, if we're talking about, there's an argument I think to be made that that contribution isn't there like it is if you're a licensed hunter, fisher, or trapper. And so the funding piece of that could address that.
So I'm just to come back to the bill though.
Yes.
That this has nothing to do about changing the qualification. It simply says that if these folks want to be heard, you'll listen to them. That's all it says. It does not mean they have authority over appointments. It doesn't mean they have authority over qualifications. It means that these are groups whom, if they want to be heard, you're authorized to listen to them. That's what the bill does.
Yes.
And would it be fair to say that, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but might someone think that for the commission not to even want to listen is essentially telling folks to go pound sand who you have said that you need to come and help eventually with the funding for the operations?
But I don't think that happens now, Senator. So any of these groups that come before the commission, they have an opportunity to voice their opinion and to make suggestions. The commission entertains that, and they can, in fact, even once they hit those other qualifications, can become a commission member. There's nothing to prevent that now without this bill. So the only thing I am saying is if the general consensus is to change the makeup of the commission, I think to do that, before we do that, we need to take a hard look at who's in control of it, where the money is coming from, who is contributing to that, and then make sure those people are put on that commission.
Not to quibble, Colonel Jordan, but there's nothing, the if part of your sentence is if changing the makeup of the commission, and this bill does not do that. So that's why the if-then of the funding is a little hard for me to understand as a reason to oppose it.
Yep. Oh, I understand. All I can do is bring you what my commission has asked me to do.
I appreciate it.
I understand that.
So on line 14, where it does say, no, I'm sorry, 13, the habitat or outdoor recreation, which has been registered with the department. Isn't there a fee being registered with the department? It says registered with the Department for State for at least 2 consecutive years. Don't revenues go to the?
That'd be Secretary of State.
No, that'd be the Secretary of State.
Yes, no, we don't get any of that. No.
But you want some of that money.
I want the funding mechanism. I think, to be honest with you, we're over here debating commission members when really the funding system is where the debate needs to be. It isn't going to matter who's running it if we can't pay for it, in my opinion.
So on the side,
Yes.
as far as funding it, rather than as we're doing it, what would be a good figure for us to fund it with?
I think it's time to consider making it a general fund agency like all other agencies are in the state, or most others.
Off the top of your head, what would something like that cost us?
Well, that's a hard question to answer because I think it would depend on how much of a general fund agency you required. I am not an advocate for doing away with licensing the sportsmen and women to help fund it. I just think that the time has come that general fund should be a permanent addition. Every year we come over and ask for help and we get it. And I can't thank you enough for that because we wouldn't survive without it. I think the time has come where we need a permanent number each year that can be relied on and budgeted for. And I would keep it in that, we'd have to look at it in a total breakdown, but I think in that 10 to 15% range would be a huge improvement over our total budget. Our total budget is $34 million. So in the big scheme of things, that's a lot of money, but that's not a lot of money when you look at a lot of other state agencies.
And it is a revenue, we draw a lot of revenue just from people coming out of state.
We do, absolutely do. And there's a lot of documentation to support that from all outdoor groups, I think. And so it makes sense to tap into those groups. And then I think our commission would be more open into changing its makeup.
Well, I'm glad we had this talk. Thank you. Any
Thank
other
you.
questions? Senator Pearl.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Colonel, for coming in.
Thank you, sir.
Just to further expand a little bit on what Senator Waters was saying, I think your point, Senator, is you want to make sure that these groups have a voice and they're heard. I mean, it's been my experience. I would say agriculture has is greatly impacted by all of the policy decisions of the Fish and Game Division, because a lot of what you do is managing the wildlife that we're competing with essentially every day to bring a crop to harvest. And I would say that, agriculture doesn't necessarily have a spot on the commission, but we certainly are impacted greatly by it. But I know that you've always been, your agency and the commission has always been very responsive and very interested and willing to listen to the things that come out of our industry, as I suspect they would be with the outdoor recreation industry too, because we do realize that you guys realize a lot of what you do impacts many areas.
Oh, yes.
So I'd just like your thoughts on that about, the commission and the policies that are made and how you do balance those competing interests for.
And so you're absolutely right. I mean, we work with all of those groups. It isn't locked. It used to be years ago locked to just hunters and fishermen. Those days are long gone. You have to recognize that the Farm Bureau, the Timberland Association, AMC, all of our hiking groups, you know, we're all affected by what we do here, and so they have a voice stronger in history than they've ever had. For airing those concerns and having those things addressed. The one thing that, you know, an open commission meeting, there's an opportunity for members of the general public to come in and voice their opinions or their concerns. We have public hearings, we have biennial hearings. I think there's more than ample opportunity for everyone to have their interests discussed and provided. And I think, being there for over 3 decades, that the commission is pretty good about taking all of that into consideration. They can't always decide. They can't always make a decision based on a small group of individuals. They have to look at a bigger picture. They have to base it on science. But to say that they're not heard they're better heard today than ever, because it's just the world that we live in. And so, you know, I bite my tongue sitting there listening to it because, yes, we're hearing you, but we would like you to step up and start paying for it, because there are others who have been doing it historically for over 90 years, and it's time for that to be spread out a little more because it does affect all of those groups. And so once that's done, I think the argument to change the commission would be weaker, to not change it. I think it would come into bearing where it's time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
And just for the record, Jason Stark from the Timberland Association and Robert Johnson from the Farm Bureau opposed, but do not wish to speak. And that is it. You're not on the list, and this is a habit with you. I'm sorry. You've been here for a while now. And I don't mean to be disrespectful, but everybody signs the sheet and they come up. And we still have to exec, so maybe next time. With that, I'm closing the hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none. Now, 307, SB 307. Is there a motion?
I'll move on to pass.
Is there a second? So I do have an amendment, and I want to pass this around if I could. You have the amendment?
Is that this one?
Yeah.
621? Yes.
Yes.
That's for you.
That's for you. Josh, you want to come up? Walk us through this, if you don't mind, seeing how you're the expert in one of the experts in the room.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Josh Elliott, Director of the Division of Policy and Programs. With me, I have the actual expert, Mr. Dan Phelan.
Great, so thanks for having us here today. We have offered a few changes to SB 307 based on testimony that I provided a couple of weeks ago at the last hearing, and this has been the result of further discussion with interested parties, and we have come to, I think, what the department is comfortable moving forward today. So for your recollection, this authorizes transmission services agreements associated with projects that receive a grant or award from the federal DOE. We have changed a few characteristics. First of all, we have decreased the size limits of the agreement. The original language had 240 megawatts. We proposed 120 megawatts in order to link New Hampshire's 10% load with the 10% of the line. We lowered the maximum agreement length from 40 years to 30 years. This was something to balance the risk of having a bad contract on the books for ratepayers for too long. We removed the concept of long-term power purchases from this language. So that comes in multiple places in the legislation. On lines 8 and 9 is the sort of typical where you would have seen long-term agreements with energy purchases. We read the bill as introduced as allowing for long-term contracts in addition to what was authorized under SB 54 last year, and want to keep the power purchase agreement discussion separate from the transmission services agreement discussion. There are also some minor technical changes. We clarified, which Form 1 you're supposed to look at. We added, excuse me, I skipped over another important one, which was the criteria. We added criteria for which the PUC should address in their review of these agreements. And those are in section Roman 3A through F that you have before you. Finally, there were changes made to the cost recovery mechanism in section Roman 4, and I'd be happy to answer questions you have about those.
Thank you very much. This is a very exciting bill, obviously. Questions from the committee?
I may.
Yes.
I just want to thank you all for the efforts that have been put in. I think we all know what's at stake here and how important this is, and this lets us move forward. And I appreciate, Mr. Chairman, your shepherding this. This is potentially a huge win for New Hampshire's economy and electric supply in the future, and I'm glad we found a way to get some numbers that seem to work. But thank you.
Further questions?
I don't think so. I was just reading through everything I wrote down, trying to make sure we covered it. I think I'm okay.
Thank you. Thank you, and I appreciate you coming in. And Simon, do you want to comment on this at all? Are you happy? I can't see you. Good?
He looks happy.
You look happy? Yeah.
I think Nectar's view is it's less bad.
Excellent. Well, thank you for your vote of confidence. All right, so further discussion.
I'll move on to pass on 621.
I think we moved it already.
The amendment, or is that already?
Oh, the amendment, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, say that again, Phil?
Move the amendment.
Yeah, he just moved it.
I'll second that.
No, he moved the amendment.
He's moving the amendment and I'm seconding.
All right, further discussion. Seeing none on SB 0621S. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Is there a motion to move as amended?
I'll second. You made the motion.
It's
your bill.
It's my bill, I make the motion.
I'll second.
Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none.
Consent? Second?
All in favor of consent?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none. I'll take this one out. Thank you. All right.
Can we do 310?
310, yes.
I'll move ought to pass.
Second.
Is there a motion on the amendment to the bill?
I'll move amendment 626S.
Second? Discussion?
I don't know that there's further explanation needed. I think it still should be fresh on everyone's mind, but I think it fixes two technical issues that we need to within our current legislation.
Further discussion? All in favor, where's the number on that?
626.
All in favor of amendment 626?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none.
Move ought to pass as amended with 626.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? All in favor of the bill, what was it? 310, as amended?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Consent?
Seeing none.
Second.
All in favor of consent?
Aye.
Aye.
I'll take this one out if you'd like.
Okay. Did we want to work on 539 FN? This is Senator Murphy's bill on the.
Do we have the amendment from Senator Murphy?
I don't think I do, actually.
I haven't seen it, so.
No, I didn't get that yet. Okay, so we'll wait on that one. That's Senator Murphy's bill on
539.
539. I didn't get it.
That was a damn bill.
That's a damn bill. All right. This last one that we heard, do you want to make a motion on it? Or you want to wait?
Well, I mean, let's have some discussion. I'll move on to pass, just for
Okay,
discussion.
for discussion, I'll second it.
So, I said I
542.
want to discuss, and I don't exactly what to say. Let's just open it up and look at it again.
Yeah, so striking the first section, yes.
So regardless, the first section goes, and I certainly, you know, I have had, I mean, I think I was part of bills to try to get more money and to do this and that for Fish and Game, and I think that I think Colonel Jordan and everybody is right that we've got to think about how we're going to, what we're going to finally do about funding. It ought to happen in a budget year.
Yep, $30 million.
I think that we ought to have a bill next time and have some time to, I don't think we need a study committee for that. I think we need time to talk between now and filing period to see what our House colleagues and well, we'll know about a governor at some point, but, you know, I think that that's clear, and I think maybe some momentum has developed to try to do something about that big issue. I'd like to, but it seemed to me that it's extraneous to this bill, fine. Because this bill does not change the makeup of the commission. It does not change the qualifications of commissioners. It says that if people want to make recommendations and they fit these criteria, like sporting clubs, that they could send their list of people in. That's all. Now, just in terms of context on this, you know, anybody can go talk to, the commission meets, anybody can go talk, okay? I do think that there's been frustration now for many years about whether or not outdoor recreation folks have any skin in the game or any voice, really, when it comes down to it. And I don't want to go into examples of people who felt that they did not, that the commission was not really listening or acting in their best interest. That's, you know, I'm not here about that. I'm here as a positive step to be able to say that this is a vehicle for folks, if they want to become more involved and more supportive. I think it's such a low cost here that you're saying that if these are registered groups and they want to send in their 1 to 3 names, they can do that. And I'm really kind of taken aback by the defensiveness over somehow you're going to change the commission, or you want to change the qualifications and say that you don't have to be a hunter or fisher to be on the commission, or this, that. None of the above. It seemed to me as a step towards building the consensus. Colleagues, if you think it's premature or don't want to do it, but that's the reason this was brought in, and I think it would help. And I don't know how the House will look at it, but you know, I've worked on this outdoor recreation industry now, several bills. You know, thank you, Senator Bradley, for Granite Outdoor Alliance. That's just hugely important. I got the bill and got the funding into the BEA for that office there, which is doing great work. And I just think it's time to build a bridge over to the Fish and Game. And as I said, what anchors this is wildlife and habitat conservation on 12 and 13. That's what people who are interested in things such as this are supposed to be able to put in their 2 cents worth about when you're looking at commissioners. Governor, please consider some of these folks who might have some background in these conservation areas that not only help Fish and Game, but help outdoor recreation. So that's all it is, but do what you will.
So we struck section 1. What if we put in section 1 as a place to study how we could fund the department?
Well, second year of the session, Mr. Chairman.
What are your thoughts?
And I, as I said when I was talking about, I don't know whether we need a study to develop a bill, but if you think it would be helpful to follow up on what Colonel Jordan is suggesting, that we could have some very simple language as a senator, a couple House members could start talking about funding for the Fish and Game Department.
Well, because it was part of our conversation, and we want, and keeping the conversation going, because it is a reality that we have to live with. We do have Fish and Game that is definitely a very integral part of our culture here in New Hampshire. It generates all kinds of revenues, and for them to be on a shoestring every year begging for money.
I agree.
I know they got 4 more conservation officers. I thought maybe they should have 7, but who am I? And because they covered the whole state, and like today with all the resources that are right at the exit 5, or is it exit 4, including a sheriff. It's interesting that now all those people are there at that 1%, just for one person. And if something happens on the other side of the state, we're shorthanded. So would it be okay if we went forward with this bill and added a study just so the conversation continues? My thoughts. Your thoughts?
My thoughts. We have some very trusted partners that we work with on an everyday basis here with the Farm Bureau, with the timberland owners, with Fish and Game themselves. They're very trusted partners, and I highly value their opinion on these things. I'm concerned about adding outdoor recreation. That is a concern for me, because I think we could add agriculture there just as easily to have a position. I think it more directly impacts agriculture than it would outdoor recreation, personally, with the decisions of the commission. And I think we have a commission that has done a very darn good job for 90 years in balancing the competing interests of all the things that are presented to them for managing our wildlife and our wildlife policy. I agree with you that we probably need to look at the funding. Not probably, we do need to look at the funding source, and I would say that once we do that and we sort that out, then maybe we need to look at changing the commission. But currently, if we're leaving things as are, I think the commission is serving its purpose and serving the interests of the state of New Hampshire very well right now. I think they've done a really good job in balancing that. And everybody does have a voice, and the reason I brought that up with Colonel Jordan when he testified is because I know from my work in the agricultural industry that when there's an issue, you go and talk with them, and they're very responsive, and they do a very good job at trying to manage that. We're very much a competing interest with wildlife management in the ag world. As I said, everything we grow, wildlife is trying to eat it. And we're trying to raise a crop and bring it to harvest, and wildlife is trying to consume it for their own interests of survival. And so we work with them, and we raise concerns. We don't have a seat on the commission. Probably should, just the fact that we have a very large interest in it. But I think what we have works. I would support looking at the issue of funding first, and then looking at the makeup of the commission. But I would agree that I don't want to change the commission right now from the makeup it is.
I guess, if I may, Mr. Chairman, I guess what's hard, Senator, is that, as I said, the bill does nothing to change the makeup of the commission. It says that these people, if they wish, can make recommendations for nominations.
Senator, is there anything stopping
other
them
people? You can't do it any other way.
Is there anything stopping them now from going and saying to these
they can't
groups
do it.
that
They have no authority. They can't. They have no authority to make a recommendation that will be viewed as a recommendation. And the Fish and Game Commission would have no authority to consider such a recommendation.
But there's nothing stopping them from having a conversation with any of these other groups that can, especially the wildlife and habitat conservation groups. They could certainly take consideration of the outdoor recreation when they're making their recommendations.
I would think that, see, these recommendations are going to the governor. Mm-hmm. And I would think that anybody can go when the governor has made a selection and talk about it at executive council. But the point is, why should they care if they've not been involved in the process? Why should they care at all, or why should they feel that their voice really counted for anything if they haven't been just in the process? If they wanted to say, look at these names, and those names will go to the governor. That's all it is.
I understand. I understand. I do. I hear a lot of concerns myself from folks in the hunting industry that when they go to the meetings, they don't feel like their voices are heard. But I assure them that they are, and I always encourage them to go, and I would say the same about the outdoor recreation. That's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I've said what I was going to say. I think that there's
Well, hunting's in here.
that this would be helpful, but if we don't have the votes, then you want to do a replace all with the study, that is another way to go. But
Well, the colonel did say that's kind of like putting the cart before the horse. I think he said that. But at the same time, I thought make it more palatable by putting it in section 1 with the study.
Well,
would that be okay? And just keeping this as it is, but putting the study for recommending on how to fund it differently? Pardon me?
I will support putting the funding in the first section and keeping it as it is in the second section.
It's a good compromise, right?
So.
I came up with that idea.
I still think I would be more supportive if we were looking at the funding mechanisms and other interests having the ability to recommend all in a study committee more than I would making the change. I would think you want to look at it all as a whole package, personally.
why don't we, this has been a good conversation. Why don't we take it up next week?
Okay.
I'm okay with it.
And we'll talk.
And if you have any ideas.
Yeah, I
on
got some
change-
ideas, but we'll
Okay.
talk. Man, as I said,
Yeah.
yeah.
One thing if I can, I don't want to lose sight of the fact that technical mistake has.
Yeah, O2, yep, I wrote that down. Phil, you saw that, right? So 206.2 instead of 3.
You're still talking about taking section 1 out completely, though.
Yeah, in section 1 out,
Yes.
but I'm definitely strongly considering the study as far as how we actually fund the department.
Yes. Okay.
While
Good
at the
conversation
same
to have.
time keeping the licensing and registrations and all that kind of stuff, yeah. So with that, we'll suspend that, but just keep that in mind as we move forward. And,
Talk about 545 for a minute.
we can talk about it.
I'm not sure that I'm ready to do anything with it.
She has another, she's looking at another amendment, why would we?
I'm sorry, what?
She's looking at doing another amendment, why would we talk about it right now?
Oh, I wasn't aware she wanted us to look at another amendment, fixing it.
She was
Oh,
working
she
on.
was, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I didn't come away with that. Okay, never mind. I'll pull back and wait for that then. My apologies.
So with that, I think we're done for the day. So,
Anything on 390? We'll talk next week on 390?
yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
All right, good. Thank you.
And so is there a motion to move out of exec?
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, and we are dismissed. Thank you for your hard work, and thank you everybody for being here. Yep.